Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. We are so glad that you're with us. All right, a lot to get to this week, not only here in Michigan, but nationally. But first, a focus on Lansing this week as the state school board gets an earful over proposed LGBT policy and the legislature drags its feet on a bailout for Detroit public schools. Let's get to DPS first. The state, House, and Senate are still at odds over which bailout plan is the best for DPS. Some lawmakers are still angry with the recent teacher sickouts, and the State Treasury Department announces that the district still runs out of cash this summer under the House's plan. Now, meantime, Transition Manager Steven Rhodes presented his 45-day financial turnaround plan for the district to an angry crowd this week. Adding to the negative optics surrounding the district, more guilty pleas in the kickback scheme involving a school vendor and several principals. All of this adds up to a terrible position for the district to be in, limbo for parents, teachers, and students, and a political nightmare without give on either side. And that is where we start tonight with our MiWeek contributors Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. I just feel that this keeps rolling forward, gathering more things in its wake. And Nolan, I'm going to start with you. How far apart are the sides still in the terms of the Senate's version of this and the House's version?
About $150 million apart. It's a tough ask. You're asking these lawmakers. I think both sides, both Senate and House, agree that the debt's got to go away. That $515 million or whatever it is to erase the debt. I think they've got approval from both chambers on that. But when it comes to the added money, this $200 million that is sort of loosely spelled out what they're going to do with it, that's a tougher sell for lawmakers who are saying, well, look, you're adding all these new programs. That's great, but my district needs these new programs too. And you're in an election year, and you've got to answer to the people back home. Plus, you've got to have a dozen or more, 13 principals who've had their hand in the pot here, taking and stealing money. You've still got corruption in this district. That makes it a hard sell. So it seems like everything's sort of lining up to make this tougher than it should be.
So they're really talking about what they're calling startup costs. And then the state treasurer came out, Stephen, and said, well, if they go with what the House plan is right now, the district is going to be back in the hole again by the end of August, September, because they don't have enough money to keep going.
Right. I mean, the House plan the House plan as it was passed is not going to pass the Senate and won't get the governor's signature. And frankly, it was a pretty obnoxious gesture on the part of some pretty myopic politicians in that chamber.
Wait, do you believe, though, that what Nolan said is saying that, look, they don't know what some of this money is going to be spent on? Do you believe that is a valid argument, though, for them not passing the Senate's plan?
I don't think that's a valid argument. I think that there is an awful lot of racial paternalism going on here. There's a lot of animosity being directed at teachers who are, I can't for the life of me figure out what teachers have done to cause the problems
staying out of
DPS.
school for what, 6-7 days this year?
But they had
all these kids
what
on
was
the
their
street?
choice?
That doesn't build goodwill.
Hold on, it doesn't build goodwill. But think of how teachers have been treated in Detroit over the last 40 years. I mean, what else were they supposed to do to draw attention to the things that they need fixed? There is this weird dynamic in Lansing that somehow
they should obey the law. When you're asking for help and you're out there breaking the law and putting kids on the street, it makes for a tougher request.
There is this weird dynamic in Lansing where there's an effort to try to make this seem like something other than what it is. This is a product of a long time of absolute disinvestment in urban education, in urban centers. No question, in Detroit, we've made a hash of schools ourselves for a really long time. I mean, I covered the district in the early 1990s. It was a joke then. I mean, you can go back and read the stories that I wrote then, change the names in them and publish them today. Same stories today. So, I mean, we've all made this mess. The state, though, is responsible for the last 16 years of it or so, and now wants to punish teachers and unions and these other folks as a way of sorting it out. It doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't make sense, frankly, to the folks in the Senate who passed, a pretty tough measure, a measure that was hard to get through, to pay for all this and to set the stage for some measure of success in the future. The House is off of the reservation, though, just doing whatever it wants to do and making this into a nakedly political issue.
The House is looking at this, and I agree. They added too much to this bill, and there's too much Detroit-specific labor language in the bill. I don't think that would ever hold up. But they're also saying, well, look, this $200 million in startup costs. I mean, when you think about startup costs, you're thinking primarily administrative costs. And there's a lot of things in there that have nothing to do with the administrative startup of a new district. It's expanding programs. It's a whole wish list of things that every district in the state wish they could fund, but have to pay for themselves. And these folks have got to go back to their constituents and explain why they passed this measure. It's not an easy thing to ask of them. I think the debt, no brainer. They're going to pass that. Everybody agrees. They're going to have to tailor this $200 million package down to something a little more reasonable and a little more justifiable in terms of the actual startup costs and operating costs of the district.
Do you think that there's a lack of urgency in the legislature right now, that they should be working on this as we speak, that this should be worked on every day until they get some kind of compromise here?
Well, I think they should, but there's very little in Lansing that gets that kind of attention. Yeah. You know, it doesn't. The organization doesn't function that way on almost anything. They push stuff off till the last minute, and then, you know, when the gun's to everybody's head, they come to their senses and pass something. I don't expect that we'll see anything different here. I mean, I think that again, the question is whether you can maintain the level-headedness of what was passed in that Senate plan, not just in terms of the money, but things like the Detroit Education Commission.
It's not going to happen.
You know, reining in out-of-control charter schools. We got charter schools that are doing things. You have Sharon McPhail running a charter school in Detroit.
All right, I'm sensing sarcastic laughter, Nolan. Go ahead.
You could find the same number of public schools. And what's happened with the Detroit Education Commission, instead of being what it was originally proposed to do, to say we're going to make sure every school in this city is a quality school and every kid has a quality school choice, it's morphed into just exactly what you said. We're going to use it to put a leash or rein on charter schools.
Yeah.
And, you know, the question you have to ask, does this plan survive? Because they've all said we're going to close bad schools regardless. Does this bailout plan survive? Does this plan survive if they have to say, oh, we got 15, 20 Detroit public schools that shouldn't be open. Their quality's terrible.
No.
We're going to shut them down.
That's not how it works.
This plan doesn't survive
That's not how it works.
They've got to keep the enrollment up.
See, now you're ascribing something to it that's not in it's not in the legislation. It's not about closing schools. It's about how you expand schools and where and why.
We're going to expand schools in a shrinking student population.
Well, they're talking about making sure that there are certain schools in certain neighborhoods.
We have closing schools.
No, it is not closing. DEC is not closing schools. Absolutely not. And I challenge you to find the part of the legislation that says it's going to close anything.
Which schools open,
it's to determine when they open, and that's different. And what's happened in Detroit
Why would we be opening new schools?
Well, how about the fact that we only have one high school on the entire northwest side of the city?
You've got probably 50% more seats in the Detroit public schools than we need. You're going to have to close schools.
But geographically, you need to close schools overall, but you need to locate them in the places where kids are. You need some rational system to do that instead of just letting anybody with a couple bucks in their pocket and an idea say, well, I'm going to run a school next year. And then, of course, they open it up. It doesn't work out. It closes down, adds to the uncertainty, adds to the instability in the district. There needs to be a system. Every other city in the country, every other state in the country that deals with charter schools does it that way.
Well, because
we're the only one that does it.
Every other state in the country that deals with charter schools approach charter schools as some sort of adversarial force in education rather than the positive force.
Why does it work other places?
It doesn't work other places.
Why does it work? Are you kidding? This is the worst. We have the worst results for charter schools in the entire country.
And that is not true.
It is true.
Look what's happening in New York City, where the charter school movement was offering hope. De Blasio shutting him down.
Look at Massachusetts. Look at Tennessee.
Look at Louisiana.
Hang on one second. Nolan, finish your argument, then Stephen.
Washington, D.C., where the education establishment, the union-controlled education establishment, Democratic politicians are shutting down charter schools and forcing parents back into bad public schools. That's what will happen here, given the change.
Give me an example of how you believe it works.
Massachusetts, Maryland, Tennessee, Florida. The examples.
Other states that are fixing their public schools.
No, they also have rules and regulations that deal with making sure that charter schools, when they open in high quality environments and hold themselves and are held accountable for providing a better education than what you can get elsewhere. We don't do that in Michigan. We didn't do that from day one.
Do that for any schools.
Let me ask this. Hang on, guys. Let me ask this. So do you believe the success of Detroit Public Schools hinges on that Detroit Education Commission.
I think if you don't get control of the landscape in Detroit in terms of who operates schools and where and according to what standards, you have no shot at improving the overall environment. We've had 22 years of this Wild West experiment with charter schools where they do whatever it is they can think to do. There are no consequences. There's no accountability. It hasn't worked.
There's a whole lot of kids who graduated from high school and now leading successful lives who wouldn't have had that chance otherwise because of those 22 years. I think to use success and Detroit Public Schools in the same sentence is an oxymoron almost. I think that this school is a school district that can't be saved, and it should be broken down into different units, smaller units. Maybe all schools are charter schools, but what's going to happen here, there's going to be $700 million poured into this, and in 5 years, 10 years, we're going to be back in the same mess we are now.
When do you think that we're going to get this $500 million or $700 million? When would you like to see the date for this happen?
Well,
when do you think the legislature?
They have to do it before July, right? I mean, July is when July 1 or August 1st is when they run out of money. I think we'll get it before then. I don't think we'll get it by Mackinac, which is what some people would hope, but it'll come soon after. And
follow the pattern of the Rhodes deal. They'll get it late, and it'll be not quite what anybody wanted.
And hence why people are really frustrated with the legislature.